Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. I hope that your calculation's going well and that you guys are getting into a routine. That said, let's get to checking it out. Right, so our problem is our decimals, right? And if I'm going to look first at my problem, I have 39 and 71 hundredths minus 39 and 32 hundredths. So I know that these are the same. So I'm just looking at my decimals. And maybe it's easier to see when we write it this way. When we rewrite it, when it's horizontal, left to right, we always rewrite. So this number is first, this number's on the bottom. This is called our vertical. Okay. Don't try to flip flop that and change it. The only operation that we can really do that with, we can do that with addition, but we can also do that with multiplication. We cannot do that with our subtraction here. Okay. Very different problem. When we look this way, it might be easier to see. If you see, and I'm going to circle it in this part, if you see, I'm looking at this one. So I know I'm really just using the decimal part. So my answer is going to be less than 1. Okay, so I'm really just going to say my estimate. This is for my estimate. I know that it's less than 1. And that should help me. If I really want to get technical, I'm looking here. This would be like 70. This would be like 30. 70 minus 30. And I'll write that over here so you see what I'm talking about. If I have 70 minus 30, I hope you guys got that would be about 40, right? And so on this case, so my decimal will be about 4 hundredths, so 0.40. Okay, remember 2 decimal places is hundredths. I hope you guys remember that. Okay, so let's take a look. Subtraction, start on the right. If I have 1, I cannot take 2 away. Remember, don't you dare try to flip that. If I have 1 and I have to give 2 away, I'm going to give them my 1, but I owe them 1. Okay, so even if you flip-flopped and you had your 1, be careful because that's not the real answer. So I need to borrow or regroup. So this 7 becomes a 6, and I give 10 over here. 11 minus 2 gives me 9. 6 minus 3 gives me 3. 9, and we know over here that this is going to be 0. 9 minus 9 is 0. 3 minus 3 is 0. Okay, and here I have 39 hundredths, and notice that's really close to my 40. So I'm just going to circle it here instead of rewrite it up there. Okay, let's take a look at our number line. On our number line, right, this is going back. Now I'm going to get my highlighter and I'm going to mark our benchmarks. Okay, so when I mark my benchmarks, and sorry guys, my 1/4 wasn't that great, but I'll remember how I'm doing that. I'm splitting this distance between 0 and 1/2, I'm splitting that in half. And it's kind of hard to tell, right? Because you have your, they had the point plotted. So we're going to make sure that we're going halfway in between, and that's going to be 1/4. And then halfway in between 1/2 and 1 is going to be 3/4, right? This one, we know when we think of in terms of quarters, this is 0.25 or 25 hundredths. And this is 75 hundredths, 0.75. That's like my quarters, right? So I'm going to kind of put it this way, above it. And over here, I have that. Now, and if I want to use the same idea, right? Half is the same as 0.50 or like 50 cents, okay? And when I do that way, I'm pretty clear on which one, this B, is going to best represent it, right? This C is close to my 0.50, right, or 50 hundredths. And over here, look at my D is really close to my 75 hundredths. And we also know that the point C and point D definitely cannot be the answer if we use that, even if we didn't know where that was, because of the fact that this is at a half and we know that half is 0.5. So neither of these make sense. Okay, when I look this way, I see that this is much closer to 0. So this also really doesn't make sense, but A and B would make a heck of a lot more sense as possible choices. These are definitely out because they're much larger than my 30 hundredths that it's asking me. Okay, so then I just have to take a look from that. Number lines are hard, and I hope you guys are getting better with that. Make sure you guys let me know if you need more help, okay? All right, on this one, we're going to answer as a mixed number if possible. So anytime we're adding fractions, so I got stuff sliding here. Okay, Remember, whenever I'm adding or subtracting fractions, I always have to have a common denominator. So if I have my 4 and my 5, remember I look for the least common multiple. Check out the classroom if you're forgetting how, because we have our resources. If I'm looking at my multiplication chart, I'm going down 4's column and I'm going down 5's column to the number I come to first. The number that I come to first is going to be 20. So I'm going to rewrite that down here. Because remember, what we're doing when we have our common denominator is making the same size pieces. In order for me to get to 20, I did 4 times 5. So I have to multiply the numerator by the same. And I did 5 times 4. So I have to do that numerator by the same. I'm going to make my problem over here because I know that I have 20. When I'm doing this one over here, I'm going to do 22 times 5. So I'm going to have 5 times 2 is 10. 0, carry my 1. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. So I have 110 over 20. And when I do any 11 times any of the single numbers is just going to be this number in my tens, this number in my ones. So I get 44 over here. Okay, let me see if I can make this clearer. Okay, so once I have my same size pieces, I'm just going to add my numerator. So I rewrote my problem over here, and 0 plus 4 is 4, 1 plus 4 is 5, and then plus 1. So I'm going to end up with 154 over 20. So I end up with 154 over 20. Oops, there we are. And if I rewrite that problem, it looks like this, right? I'm taking that because this is where I get my mixed number. In one whole, I have 20 pieces, and I have 154 pieces to split up. That seems like a lot, guys, but we're going to break it up so that we think about it the other way. So I rewrote this to just break it up so it was going to make it easier, okay? And I know that I'm going to have this 4 that's going to be left, so I know for sure that I will have that because 4 cannot go into the 20. But I can break these up, right? So I'm going to have, and actually what I could do, so I'll write it there, or I could have wrote 54 divided by 20. But I wanted to show you, this is my hundreds, my tens, my ones. Okay, so when I do this, do you see how there's a 0 here? So I'm going to just kind of pretend like it's that way. And I know that I'm going to have, because that's where my zeros are. So I'm really just looking at 10 divided by 2. And I know I end up with 5. Now remember, this is in my tens. So that's the reason why we're going to have that, because that's moving over. If I have 50, when I have my 50 divided by 20, same idea, I'm going to cross this out. And if I do 5 divided by 2, I'm going to equal, I can do 2 groups because that's going to give me 40. And then I'm going to have 10 left over. So I'm going to just write that. Technically, we would put that as 2.5, right? But if I'm thinking of that so that we kind of make sense of that. And then for this problem, I know that we have 4 divided by 20. I know I'm going to get, this becomes 1/5, or like our decimals. So I'm going to cross this off and say, because of the fact, just because for this problem, for the way we're doing that, we're looking for the number of groups. So I have so far, I have the 5 groups plus 2 more groups. So that's going to give me 7 full groups. And then when I look, remember I have this 10 left over and I have this 4 left over. So that's going to be like 14 over 20. Okay. And we're rewriting that as our remember, instead of saying remainder, we're writing it as what was left over what we were dividing by. Now, hopefully we recognize the fact that both of these are even numbers. So I have to look for, knowing that these are even, 2 is a factor. I usually, when I try to simplify a fraction, look for my greatest common factor, but I'm going to start with my 2. So I'm going to move that over so you see what I'm doing, right? And I'm dividing by 2 over 2, because whatever I do to the top, I do to the bottom. because this is like 1, 7, and this is going to be 10. So this is going to be my lowest terms because 7 is prime, and I cannot do 7 times anything and equal 10. So my final answer when we go over here for all that work, right, is 7 and 7/10. Okay? How are you doing with that? I know that fractions and mixed numbers are difficult, but you guys got this. All right, hopefully this one was a little easier. I have my 0. I'm starting at my 0, and then I'm moving over 2/4. When I look, and this was kind of nice for us, it was already split. Remember, I'm looking between my 0 and my 1, or I can look between any of my 2 whole numbers. And I'm looking for my hops. 1, 2, 3, 4. That tells me that this is split into fourths. Okay. That's why that's 4 equal pieces. It kind of helps to hop because I know a lot of you want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is not the case. When we're splitting it up, we're looking at these pieces. That's why we have the hops. So when I do that, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 equal pieces. And that's the same between each of them. So if there's 4 equal pieces, I know 4 is going to be my denominator, and then I just keep going. So when I start at 0 and I move over 1, this line is 1/4, and here's my 2/4. And this is looking for 0 and 2/4. So this is my spot right here. Okay, a little easier one today. Hope it's getting better. Let me know.